service cuts. And so we didn't even look at personnel costs because we have a police union and we have a public works union that cover a lot of, what, 2/3, if not more, of our personnel. And so we don't even have a choice. That's gonna go up 4% for public works and 5% for police department. And then we added the 4% for the non-union, which is typically what the city has done. And so personnel costs, we didn't even look at. That's a given, unless we're firing somebody.
I'm gonna kind of ask a question based off that. When we hired Rick, part of the assumption was that he would become ICC certified, correct? Has Rick obtained that? So we're paying him at the wage that we projected that certification would get him?
I don't know about
That was before,
I mean, that was a
that was
requirement
before
of that
me, so I
position?
don't know.
I don't know either.
Is he
I know
okay with
we've
it?
asked and we've gone through it, and I don't think Rick is doing that. I don't think he's capable of doing it. I think he is. I know that from what Greg said, that was their intentions when they hired him, but I don't know where that went. You know, with Perry being retired, I was already under the assumption that we were gonna, because I had asked Rick right away if he was working on it, and he said, well, I've tried, and I don't know if he's capable of achieving. And the salary wise, I have no idea.
It is a
where that
challenge.
goes.
It is a challenging prospect to get your certifications while you're working full-time too. I mean, I think that learning to having building code, all the number of different things for building code is a bit of a challenge. A little bit more than gonna go spend 12 weeks at the police academy learning that.
No,
But
I don't
know,
disagree, but
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about personnel, like, you know,
Yeah.
the expenses and payroll
If we're
or paying somebody to have that
a
certification and they don't have
We
it.
shouldn't be paying for it.
I don't think he's getting paid at the same rate as what Perry is.
Why,
He is not.
I don't
Yeah,
think
he
that
is
was,
not.
I mean, I don't think that was how it was
And-
hired either.
But if we hired somebody to do a certification, they haven't done the certification, then that's like, why, like, they didn't uphold their end of the bargain.
We can look at his offer letter to see what, I don't recall what was in there, but we can look at it
Okay,
to see if that was a requirement when,
that's a good, yeah, I mean,
when he was hired.
not to take shots at anybody or anything. but
I
if you
think the
hired
intent-
to do something, you don't do it, then
Well, I mean, we're not gonna hire somebody at the police department to get their certification within a year and then,
not get it and
Not
still
get it.
pay them. Like, that's a police
But
officer.
if they're not, you can change that job description to where if they're doing a satisfactory job in the nuisance abatement and rental inspection sections, which he is certified to be a rental inspector, right? I believe so. And leave him in that job function, because I think the intent was that at some point he would move from that position to the other. Well, if he can't do that, that's fine. We just won't move him there. And we'll find somebody else to take that building inspection job. Or build inspector's position, is what my intent would be.
Good answer. Like,
just, I mean, just a question.
we're just
And I
asking
can do some checking to see
questions.
what a nuisance officer in the state gets paid too, just as a comparison, you know?
Unless they're all in
Can you find
the
out
Des
by
Moines
Wednesday?
Metro.
Sorry.
Can you find out by Wednesday this week? I mean,
I can do
no,
some
that's our
checking.
next
Yeah.
budget. Is that possible, you think?
Yep.
Okay, we'll figure on that.
Do you have any other
Any
questions
other questions on that?
on building and what else do we have for today?
Alright, admin, administration
Oh, that should,
is next.
can we knock that one out quick?
What page?
62, tab E. 62 is where it would start.
So on page 62 is what we call the general government part of the budget. And This includes, the pay for council and the mayor, as well as if there's any travel and related benefits. And then also the financial administration, which is mostly the staff here at City Hall. It's pretty much business as usual there. The only thing that is really extra in that particular area is I put some monies in there requesting for some training with our new software. Was hoping that we'll look at, I don't have anything concrete or anything really researched with it, so if it doesn't come to be, we can spend the money. But being able to work with our software company and do some more training to learn more about the ins and outs and the capabilities of the software. Otherwise, it's pretty much the day-to-day operation.
Or could you explain the personnel, who the people are? The deputy city clerk is a half a person. Who is that?
That would be Deb's position. Her wages are split 50% in
Okay.
this area and then 50% in the water, sewer.
And then administration's assistants, there's 1.5.
Yep, same situation. One of the positions is split 50% city general fund and then 50%.
Who are those two?
Kelly and Karen.
Okay.
And then the other 50% is in either the water, sewer. office
Yeah, I
or
get it.
Deb is, yep.
Laura, when the city council gets the giant raise next year, where does that fall in here? Does that go under tort or? Is it?
Tort?
Have you started paying? Well, I was just looking at
No, that's tort line, we can't use that line
It
item.
would be in this area.
I just didn't know if you were pre-budgeting
It
for
is not
that or
pre-budgeted, it is not in
saving.
here, but if there is a change,
Throwing that out there.
yeah.
It's the time we talk about this, right? Tom,
Carolyn.
So no, there is not there's not a proposal in here for a change in that. So if that does come to be, the earliest it could go into
that'll be next year's budget.
effect would be January.
10% raise or not much is not much. How's that?
My point.
That is true.
What did you guys get?
So, on page 63, going down, the other thing that's kind of unique in fiscal 26, there will be a city election. So there's $4,000 in here, very comparable to what we paid the last time there was a city election. Legal services, that's all based upon how much legal consultation, that includes our city attorney as well as anytime we reach out to Allers and Cooney for questions and to help us through legal processes. And then the City Hall general budget, general building is basically the maintenance of this building and heating, cooling and stuff like that, and if there's needs to be, and then our personnel costs in there, the building maintenance specialist, part of his salary comes out of here, as well as our cleaning service, personnel comes out of here as well.
You're talking about the 83,086, that line you mean?
Yes, yep. Mhm. And then under the tort liability section, where the indication from our insurance company is we should not see as big of increase in the premiums for, the liability and the property. There will be some increase because they always build in a percent increase in the property values, just to protect against values of the buildings tend to go up. I think I did build in maybe a 10% increase, I'm hoping that's pretty high, cause last year, I think I had like a 10 or 15%, and that was really low.
Yeah. To note,
These revenues are just, it says miscellaneous, they're just scattered from all walks of life.
That it's really hard to say for sure what that miscellaneous was. Or is there one in particular, maybe I can give you a better.
No, I'm just looking at the total number of the 4060, I just,
So that would include, I think late fees, when people pay late fees on their utility bill, a part of the late fee could relate to, a late fee related to garbage services, so that gets put in that line item.
the other part, outside of the CGFL, There's only two other line items that the city can add to increase their revenues from property taxes in general. That's the tort liability and the personnel, what is that line item called now? The personnel line item,
Employee benefits.
employee benefits, thank you. And currently, we certainly don't max either one of those two out. We have them as much as we possibly can in the 810 or the CGFL, rather than that tort liability or the employee benefits line items. And that's the other part of how we're keeping our budgets lower, or our overall levy lower. Because if we wanted to, we could just move all of those costs for tort liability and employee benefits, put them in those line items and let them max out. And then we'd have, I don't know how much more available in the general fund out of the general fund levy. So we're trying to, again, that's where that conservative budgeting, where we're keeping our budget levy overall down as much as possible. Okay, so I think the only one left we have would be Randy, so why don't we take a break and have supper?
Okay, in the Public Works, we'll start in the general fund portion. The summary sheets are on section E and begin on page 46. This summary, the cover sheet, is a compilation of several different parts of the Public Works budget in the general fund. They include the street construction portion, which has been reduced to only the purchase of some detectable warning panels that we purchase and then resell to any local contractors that are building one or two sidewalks so that they don't have to go and get them at another location. We also use those for our maintenance crews to build those pedestrian curb ramps. The second part is road maintenance. That's general fund funding for some of the street-related work that's not eligible for road use tax fund expenditure. It's for like putting up Christmas decorations is one thing. And then the other is the right-of-way permit system that we have that generates some revenue into this part of the budget, and then the expenditure we do make from this general fund part of the budget. Street lighting is the next section. We have about 800 leased lights from Mid-American Energy. They are funded from this portion of the general fund. Public Works Administration, that includes the parts of the salaries for three of us here at City Hall, plus just the general administrative expenditures for the Public Works Department. City Garage, the operation of the city maintenance garage, actually both garages now, the heating, cooling, general work, as well as the salary for the mechanic in the street department. Central Business District, that's funds some of the maintenance that's involved in the taking care of the streetscape projects now that they're built. The largest expenditure is actually pretty much the electricity to run the streetlights. There are 556 streetlights in those streetscape projects. And then the transfer, street transfer from the general fund is primarily for the pedestrian curb ramp transition plan at $50,000 a year. Those are, the detail of those are all included in tabs G, J, and L. We do, like I mentioned, we have a little bit of revenue, about 20,000 we're expecting coming in from right-of-way permit work that's done. As far as expenditures, personnel, we've got 1.9 full-time equivalent personnel. And then the capital outlay and transfers are, as I mentioned, the pedestrian curb ramp construction, and then the detectable warning panels purchase.
What do you have an extra $5,000 of revenue from 2024?
That would have been just based on our experience with the current fiscal year in the right-of-way permit system.
Well, it says here that you went from 17.8 to now you're at 22.3.
Yeah, that varies by permit.
Oh, it's just more people got more permits or whatever it may have been, or?
Yeah, what happens in the right-of-way permit, there's a permit fee, and I think that goes to the building department, but the city replaces pavement that's torn out in the streets from putting in a private sewer line or sewer service line or anything like that. So then we charge that back to the owner of the property. And so that's where we generate the fees. They vary based on the number of permits that are issued and the number of sewers that are replaced and so we're kind of constantly massaging that to keep it as accurate as we can. Any other questions on that general fund portion of the budget?
All our lease lights, do they work?
All of the lights?
All the lease lights, do
Lease.
they work?
I couldn't say all 800 of them work. Sometimes they don't. We report any that we see to Mid-American for repair. More recently, they've been pretty good at repairing them. We get calls from residents who will report a street light out, and we turn around and report it to Mid-American for repair.
They're quick on getting these things to.
More recently, they have been reasonable at getting them
It's very
repaired.
frustrating when I'm leasing a light that does not work.
Sure.
That's a frustration from constituents. It's like we're paying for a light that doesn't work.
Yeah, and we report them right away. I mean, but then it's out of our hands.
Our contract, does it say if the light doesn't work that we, does that make sense, or?
No.
We just pay it. We just have to.
Do they have all those on a separate meter? Is that how they're?
No, those are by tariff is what the streetlights are. They're the state utility board sets the price that Mid-American can charge for each type of streetlight. And so it's a flat monthly fee for, say, a 100-watt LED. There's a flat fee for that. And then there's a flat fee for a 100-watt LED on a wooden pole. And there's several different tariffs that are charged.
A couple years ago, was there a bunch of them that were removed at one time?
We did go through, city policy includes streetlights at all intersections and at blocks that exceed 400 feet. You could have a mid-block light, something between 200 and 300 feet minimum. So we have some of those. But a few years ago, we went through, and at one point in time, the city was putting up mid-block streetlights at alley entrances. So 400-foot block, they had a mid-block streetlight, and there were a lot of those in town. And we went through and eliminated almost all of those. There were a few cases, actually, when we went through that, we were prepared to take the light down, take it off the tariff. And private property owners stepped forward and started paying for those. So there are several mid-block streetlights still in town that are paid for by the adjacent property owner. But the city's goal, of course, is to remove them, just to keep costs reasonably under control. It's $176,000. It's quite a bit.
So bottom line is, if the light, they don't come out and fix the light, there's not much we can do.
Well, we report it, and then we kind of lose.
That's after
In
that's
fact,
after now. You know, like-
in fact, Mid-American, they have refused our request to contact us when they get it repaired, so that we can tell whoever reported it to us that it's done. Of course, they can see it, but Mid-American won't do that. They flat out refused. They said, we'll just fix them when we can fix them.
How many years have we been switched to LED?
Time goes, probably 5 years maybe. Problem that happened, interesting enough, LEDs obviously take a lot less electricity to operate, which is a good thing. But the tariff on an LED light is higher than the tariff on a high-pressure sodium light because the fixture cost is so high. They amortize that over the life in the tariff. So we actually did a good thing by switching to LED, but we paid for it. The city did. Now we have most of our, the downtown lights, the streetscape decorative lights are all owned by the city. They're put in during the streetscape projects. They are mostly LED now, and they are metered. So we've got 10 metering locations in that projects. And most of those lights, all of them that could be refit, have been refitted to LED lighting. So we're keeping our own electric costs down. But as far as the tariff, it went up when we switched to LED.
Heard that word more in the last 6 months than I probably heard in a lifetime. Tariff.
Well, this is a different use of the word, but.
I know. I've pulled it.
Okay, any other questions on the general fund portion of the budget? If not, the next would be road use tax, and that's in the tab E, begins on page 70. The detail part of that is in under tab O. Within the road, this is the road use tax fund. Of course, we receive gas tax from the state. Currently, we receive it at about $140 per capita per year, and that's the fund amount. And it can only be used for the construction, maintenance, and supervision of public streets. So it's restricted a little bit, and we follow that. Within that fund, we fund road maintenance, which is by far the largest part of the fund expenditure, snow removal, street cleaning, then some administration, and then transfer some of the funding to capital improvement projects. This year, so far, there's a proposal to transfer, or next year, $800,000 to the 12th Street project to help fund that project. The initiatives for next year, replacing the tractor-mounted backhoe and the 12th Street construction project are the two largest of the initiatives. Like I say, we do have about $140 per capita. That generates about 1.4, 1.5 million per year for that fund. Also in the revenue for that fund is a transfer from the Employee Benefit Special Revenue Fund to cover those employee benefits And that's in the, well, projected to be almost 160,000 for next year. Now, that's support that fund gives to the road use tax fund. And if you look at the balances, not balances, the, annual net balance, we're spending, exclusive of the capitals, almost the amount that we receive. So that fund is growing, the balance is growing slowly, very slowly. And with the inflation pressures, it's approaching spending everything that is generated in road use tax revenue. That's why several years ago, we began supporting that fund with the employee special revenue fund, employee benefit. Okay? Have 7.9 full-time equivalent personnel there, 6 street maintenance workers, a superintendent, and then portions of the salary of 3 of us up here in City Hall.
Are you fully staffed right now, Randy?
1 short. Pardon me?
What position?
It would be our meter service worker eventually. We have, our current meter service worker has requested a transfer to the street department, and we will honor that, we will do that. But we haven't until we replace him, because he's the only one in that position. So that technically, the opening is in water department, meter reader.
What do I gotta do?
Apply. I don't know, we're pretty selective.
You're a smart man.
Whoops.
See what $200 a month gets me. I don't know if you want to get paid more.
We have, so capital outlay, some kind of, that was the replacement of the tractor backhoe, and then the air compressor are included in the capital outlay for next fiscal year. And then the transfers is that 12th Street, like I mentioned, to support that project.
Is that what PMS is?
PMS is Pavement Management System. That one where we have proposed in the budget to get it off the ground to create a pavement management system.
So this was on your one from last year too?
Yes.
Have we gotten any closer?
We have not. It's been a lower priority project.
Talking about that PMS, it would be nice in this book if you had a glossary of some sort of all the acronyms. A lot of them you gotta guess, but you're hoping you're right.
Okay.
I mean, once you do it, it's there for year after year, you don't have to.
What did you guess for this one?
I was not gonna guess PMS. I was just
Pretty
asking
much
that one.
stupid.
You don't know that one yet, I'll look you out.
That's why I asked.
I think it'd be nice, cause there's some of them like WWT, whatever, you know.
Sure.
I mean, once you have it, then
Okay.
What would Dennis try?
So the fund balance then in that fund is reduced by about 550,000 with that $800,000 transfer, and still nets out about $3.7 million that's available for to support projects and capital purchases through the years. Any questions on the road use tax?
Kind of, I never can understand snow and ice supplies. I mean, you buy salt, a year like this, you don't use much. And then how does that reflect in our budget? What do you do with that? Just carry it forward? I mean, it looks like you
That balance,
adjust it every year.
yeah,
After you've not spent the money or spent too much, more than you expected just because of a bad year.
sure.
So
That-
that's how,
If it's not spent, it goes back into the road use tax fund balances. That's what it does. We try to, try to second guess what the winter's gonna be and how much we're gonna spend. Sometimes it's we hit it, more likely than not, and sometimes we don't. But by the same token, the expectation is that if we have a hard winter, the money's there in the balance to buy more salt.
And was there not at one time kind of a shortage of salt or brine or one of the two that made it quite expensive?
Oh, yeah.
Is that resolved at this time or?
The price hasn't come down too much. It went up at that point,
Exactly, and then-
and there was a shortage. There was a terrible shortage. In fact, the city of Carroll was down in salt. We store 380 ton of rock salt. And then we mix it with sand. We do a 50-50 mix of sand and salt and store 300 ton of that. And at one point, we were down in the amount of salt we had to about a tractor bucket full. And that's when it was short. And we had to go out and just use plain sand on the roads. And no, you don't want to go through that. I mean, ever again. But we were trying to buy salt from anywhere and everywhere. And it just wasn't available. And that year, what happened was they had really bad weather down through the south of here, through Kansas, Missouri. And the mines are in Kansas primarily, salt mines. And so they got all the salt for one thing, and then there were mine breakdowns. And one of them completely shut down during the winter. And so the rest of us all ended up with very little salt.
And have you made any headway on the 12th Street reconstruction as far as the split?
Yes, there is some I can report. I guess now, since you ask, I'll go into the entire, everything I learned.
We don't do that right now. There's headway?
Yes.
We could do it in an email, couldn't we?
Oh, it's probably easier just to explain it to you, you know. And it'll be coming back at your next council meeting for selection of the pavement width, and we can respond at that time if you want.
Yep, we'll do that, that's fine.
Randy, just since we have a reconstruction we're supposed to be planning on a reconstruction every 3 years, can you go over with the council a little bit about how you choose which street we're gonna pick?
Sure. I guess historically, I've recommended which street to reconstruct. Of course, yeah, I base that on, I guess, knowledge of the streets, and historical knowledge of the streets is one thing. The other, the state does provide a service that's called automated data collection. And every 2 years, I think they're expanding that to 3 years, they send a data collection vehicle through the streets within the state and the roads within the state. So it collects all kinds of pavement data, including cracking and roughness and you name it, everything that's involved in selection of streets. From that, they calculate a pavement condition index on every segment of road in the state. And that's on a 3-year rotating basis. So we receive that, we can compare pavement condition on all of our streets, and we use that to help make a decision, plus our knowledge and our observation of the street. Then, of course, we want to get, it's not only for the reconstruction, it's for all capital maintenance. You know, we do reconstruction, resurfacing, restoration, 3 different types of pavement restoration, I guess, or rehabilitation.
Maintenance. Pavement maintenance.
Well, it's
Or
more
something,
like
yeah.
maintenance is a little bit shallower, but it's rehabilitation. So we need to get the right rehab strategy for the right section of pavement, and then compile those sections of pavement in order to make a project in lieu of doing all 3 in the same year, rotate them to get the best bids we can, the best project size. And that's what we put together and make a recommendation then to you on those segments that we believe require that type of rehab that year, every 3 years being full depth.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the road use tax portion? Okay, capital projects is the next section. It is in tab E, beginning on page 73. The detail part of that is under tab U. The capital projects part of the budget includes four separate segments: buildings, streets, the street maintenance facility, which is pretty much closed out, and utilities. The initiatives for next year include the roof replacement project, 12th Street reconstruction, and the US 30 traffic signals. There is some revenue expected, expenditures, of course, beginning in the buildings, let's say. The revenue that's expected is pretty much just reimbursement, the balance of the reimbursement from the insurance company. The outlay is a part of the reconstruction of the roofs that were listed. I think we've gone through that project. It's been let. The contractor's preparing to begin in the spring when weather permits. Under the street portion of the budget, we do list some revenues, including that intergovernmental at $800,000. That's the road use tax transfer that I spoke of earlier. Bonds, about $2 million worth of bonds, and then other transfers, about $2.6 million. The projects in there include the sidewalk transition plan, the 12th Street construction project, obviously the largest of the projects, and then the traffic signal project we're anticipating. Street maintenance facility. The construction is completed on the street maintenance facility. The fund has a balance of about just over $50,000 in it. And we're proposing to expend about $34,000 of that funding for some equipment for the street maintenance garage. And that equipment includes some audiovisual equipment for the training room, tables and chairs for the training room, and then a new telephone system and a new radio system for the public works, totaling about $34,000. Then the balance, which I think is about $17,900, is projected to be transferred back into the general fund. Okay. And then in the utilities portion of the capital projects, we've included the US 30 West Water and Sanitary Sewer Extension Project to the Ziegler site. They've indicated recently that they are going to move forward with their project. And so we included in the budget moving forward with the city's commitment to that project. And of course, it won't be initiated until Ziegler has signed on the line to move their project forward. Any questions on that part of the Public Works budget? Okay, the next is the Water Utility Fund, and it is on tab E, beginning on page 78. The, excuse me, the detail part of that budget is under tab W, and the Water Utility Fund includes the operational fund, depreciation fund, capital improvements, and then meter deposit. So the four are all under the water utility. Within the operational fund, we have some administrative costs, operation of the water treatment plant, the high service pump station, the wells, 9 wells, distribution system, accounts and collections, GIS and transfers. Our initiatives for next year, the largest one, of course, is the Northwest Pressure Zone. Revenues in the water utility fund, we're projecting from charges for service at about $1.6 million. That rate, that's from water rates, the sale of water, has not been adjusted since 2017. So it's been funding the system since that time. We have then under expenditures, personnel services for 7.1 full-time equivalent personnel, 4 plant operators, a superintendent, a meter reader, and then portions of the salaries for 3 of us here at City Hall. The transfers include, that's for insurance, the transfer to streets for the 12th Street reconstruction project, a small debt service payment that's projected for that Northwest Pressure Zone project, depreciation, and then capital improvements. The capital item requests are meters, which is an annual request, replacement of the SCADA system in the water utility, and then the purchase of a new pickup or a replacement pickup.
Randy, these meters, you sell these meters, so like, if I have one that needs replaced, I purchase that?
If it's damaged in your use, then you purchase it. Otherwise, if it just is running slow or something, no, that's not your expense. And in a new meter, it's not your expense. The city provides new meters.
What's the new pickup? Is it like an older pickup or is it, because I want a pickup too at this point. Everyone's getting a pickup.
Yeah, I don't think I have that information with me. It's a replacement of an older pickup that we are proposing I do have that information.
And what is the, you said it more eloquent than I am, the SCADA?
SCADA system?
SCADA.
SCADA?
That's our electronic control system. Actually, SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Access.
That did nothing for me. What is?
Okay, that's our control system of our remote control system. From the plant, we can operate from a desk in the plant, we can operate the plant and all the wells. So that it's.
They should have just said that.
SCADA is shorter. That all doesn't fit on this little line.
Okay.
SCADA is shorter. But that's supervisory control system. And supervisory means you can make it do something. You don't just get information given to you. You give it back to the system. Turn a well on, turn a well off, turn the tower on, turn the tower
So is that
off.
like a yearly?
Oh, no, this was last built in 1995.
And is it broken?
Yeah, it doesn't have support anymore, like all computer systems.
Okay.
So we either take a chance without support or we bring it up to date.
And if we don't bring it up to date, then there's no water.
Well, there's a possibility of that.
That's not a possibility.
It's a pretty cool system. I went down there and looked at it.
Did you?
Can
Yeah.
you give me the information on the pickup though? You don't have to do it now. You can give it
I think that I have some information. I don't know if it's enough, but
You just got one last
yeah, this is it looks like it's the replacement of a 2005 pickup. Oh, it's running, but it's pretty much at the end of its life. Any other questions on that? Anyway, I can move on to the depreciation portion of that budget. We make an annual contribution from the fees for water to depreciation to replace any equipment necessary in that plant. There's no expenditure anticipated for this next fiscal year from the depreciation fund, and it is projected to have an ending balance of about $1.3 million. Actually, I'll back up to the Water Utility Operations Fund. We're anticipating spending that balance down a long ways with that Northwest Pressure Zone project going from a fund balance projected this current year of 1.05 million to 361,000. So that's primarily funding from the balance in that portion of the Water Utility Fund to the Northwest Pressure Zone project. In the capital improvements, of course, that's primarily the Northwest Pressure Zone project. And we're anticipating the need for about 3.7 million in bonding, in addition to the cash that's being infused into that project. And then will be under construction during the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. Meter deposit, that's simply funds that are charged to primarily renters for meters, for accounts, and then they're refunded that when they move out, if everything's okay. So it's kind of money in, money out, and we expect it to be reasonably the same revenue and expense. So are there any questions on the Water Utility Fund? I guess the Northwest Pressure Zone project is probably as good a time as any. We'd mentioned a 10% rate increase was necessary to fund the bond payment for that project. We've got a projection right now of two 10% rate increases in 2 consecutive years, beginning in July of 25 and then July of 26, and then followed by 2 more 4.5% rate increases in the next 2 fiscal years. And that's to keep the fund solvent and maintain a balance in the fund of about $500,000. So historically, this Water Utility Fund has been very well funded. Balances have been exceeded $1 million plus. So there's been no problem, obviously, since 2017, because there's been no proposal for fund rate increase since that time. Now with this project, the way it's structured, it has absorbed all of the fund balance plus the $3.7 million bond, and the bond has to be paid for, plus revenue has to be generated for the continued operation and replacements in that Water Utility Fund. So it becomes essential that rate increases begin and continue currently projected through at least the next 4 years.
So Randy, that over the next 4 years, that's a 29% increase.
Yes,
More than that.
probably exceeds that based on the end versus the current. You know, that's the percentage, that's a cumulative percentage, 10% and then 10% on that 10%. So it probably exceeds that, yes.
So once your fund is refilled back up, do you decrease
No, that just puts you to the point of where you can maintain without any other capital improvements. You know, that's where it places you, where you're in a maintenance issue. Inflation and capital improvements will impact it from there on out. Now, the other thing we mentioned was a proposed rate increase in the stormwater utility. Pretty minor. I just put in 2.5% per year for 4 years. But when you look at the total bill that you receive for your water bill, your utility bill, I guess, with those two increases in place, for the first 2 years, the total bill increases just over 3% per year. And then the following 2 years, it's under 2% per year.
So we talked about a sewer. Would there be a sewer increase that would come along with this then as well?
There is none projected at
Okay.
this time. We'll get to it, and I'll go into some detail on the financing at the sewer level, but there is none projected for those 5 years.
So there's not like a natural increase just through like inflation and stuff like that. And I think we need to look at that when we're doing these fees, is that there has to be, I mean, I understand that nobody likes things to get more expensive, but it really hurts when something increases by 10%, you know what I mean? It's like where there should be some, I guess, does that make sense? Like a 1.5% increase from that basis so that there is, you know, somewhat of a, because we don't live in a perfect world.
There's two ways of thinking it. And this, Randy and I have actually talked about that very concept. And because I've gone through a number of rate changes, whether I was at Fairfield or up in Hall, people get all kinds of wound up when you start talking about rate changes. So you can do a couple different things. You can say, all right, we're going to raise costs 22.5% every year, no matter what. Or you can do what the city of Carroll has in the past, just said, we're going to leave it flat until we get to where we have a large expenditure, and then we borrow, and then we raise the rates. In the end, you get to the same place, and I don't know if one way's better than the other. Good example from what Randy, because Randy is a very good conservative individual when he comes to budgeting this stuff. Are you then charging too much just so that you can create a balance? So I'm about 6.5 the other on that thought process. Quite frankly, because I'm never a big fan of saying, "Hey, we're gonna raise it 29% over the next," you know. But then on the flip side, if you break it down by dollars, a normal city bill of a family of 4, if I remember my numbers right, a water bill is about $30. So a 10% increase is $3.
And where are we at on normal cities, I guess? That makes sense.
Our rates?
Are rates lower because we've never increased them? Like,
My experience is that our water utility bills are much lower than everybody else's. My water and sewer bill in Fairfield was twice what it is here.
yeah, because I think it's pretty, like, our
Yes.
water, like, I remember getting here and like, man, this, like, it's very, very, yeah.
That's my experience, and I've never sat down and really done the numbers as far as checking with the utility services to say, all right, where are we officially?
There's a
But-
pretty comprehensive water and sewer rate analysis.
But we're not,
done annually.
we're definitely not at the top, right?
No, we're probably, in our water rates, we were below the midpoint, the median point. And in our sewer rates, we were just above the median point. So we're right in the ballpark, you know, as far as those are concerned, all driven by capital
With the
projects.
$3 ad, does that take us into the extremely high rate?
No.
Does that just take us up to the median?
Probably.
Put us up to
probably
medium. Just median.
The bare
Yeah.
minimum?
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Okay, that makes sense.
And
Isn't there some guidelines too that you can't bank a lot of money without any projects?
there's, the state had, a few years ago, had, I guess, tried to implement 25% balance issue legislatively. That was more in the general tax fund for balances. They never really regulated the utility type funds. That's kind of local regulation that, you know, if you're carrying big balances, your constituents are going to say, what the heck? You know, why are you increasing rates when you've got this many million in the bank? And why should you? That's the philosophy of
Yeah,
the
I'm not
past.
saying to do a massive increase, but I mean, if you can subsidize part of this with, I don't know, a 1/4% increase over the course of 5 years, and you know what I mean, at the end, you take the sting off of, we have a problem now that's $5 million. I guess, and you're right, there's two ways, and so I guess.
There's two philosophies on it. The other thing that I think you should know is in capital budgeting, usually we have these projects thought out 4 or 5 years in advance, and you can start to create the funding stream on it.
So why didn't it happen on this project? Because this has
Well,
been out there for like.
Because there was no council direction to move forward on that project. They had done, your predecessors had done some funding to help alleviate that concern in the northwest part of town, but they didn't go to this step. So when this step came, it came immediately. Do this project in the next fiscal year. No chance for funding, no chance to build a balance to fund it. It's just you do the project, so you end up borrowing, and you have to pay for the borrow. And, you know, if you, this project is a good project, no question about it. It's a very good project. But some of those homes are 40, 50, more than 40, more than 50 years old. This is not a new issue. So would a 5-year implementation of this thing have been a reasonable implementation? In most cases, yes. That would have given you a chance to begin this funding step. But by saying we're going to do it next fiscal year, which is just fine, this is the way to pay for it and get it done next fiscal year.
I think what's unfortunate is, as long as that's gone and been drawn on, it should have been started to fund 10 years ago. Knowing
Well,
this, 'cause it's
there was
been out
no,
there.
there was no direction of the council that we want to do this. We want this as a capital project.
I'll find my predecessors.
That's fine. They did, in fact, there were two. There was back in the early 90s, there was a large project.
No,
Yeah, so you don't have to look too far.
that
So,
was a joke, guys, I promise.
so that's, you know, just information. I mean,
The one advantage of raising this now is that people will understand why, because we have a major outlay.
yeah,
You know, so, yeah.
Sure.
It has to go up to fix that, so.
Mhm.
You know, I think that people will understand the 10% a little bit, not everybody, of course, but it's easier to understand when you're spending this kind of money this year, so.
The one argument from, you know, it's a very fiscal conservative approach to build your funds up and then build something. The problem with that is what we experienced over the last 4 years, what happened to inflation, what happened to costs. Whereas even a city, even in the bad times of the interest rates over the last few years, our interest rate to borrow has been 3 to 4%, whereas the citizen is borrowing at 6 or 7%. So municipal borrowing and paying some interest is actually, from my perspective, cheaper and less expensive than dealing with saving and hoping to get enough money down the road. So, for example, taking local option sales tax, putting it into a fund and saying, we're going to pay for this street. Well, if we'd have paid for that street 5 years ago and borrowed for it, we'd have had that paid for through the debt service at a less cost than the money we saved and gained interest on to pay for that same project. That's it. While it's not a conservative philosophy, you're actually saving money doing that in many cases as opposed to
Plus the
doing that.
increased price of the project.
So when we talk about doing those projects, you know, and we talked about 12th Street the last time, we don't pick the streets out, kind of like pull them out of the hat. I mean, there's a lot of thought process that goes into these projects. And again, you as a council have set that $1.40 debt service levy, so we are staying at the $1.40 debt service levy, and we're keeping our CGFL 810 levy at the 810 levy. You know, we're not raising taxes just to spend money. So understand, when we really put a lot of this work into those things, those are a lot of the things we think about and put effort into, and it's really difficult to recover from losing a project and then having to refigure out all the finances after the fact. So that's just my 2 cents.
Along that same line, there's a philosophy of debt in municipal government. It depends on who should be paying for it. Should the people now be paying for something that will be built in the future? Or should the people that gain the advantage of what's built be paying for it from there on? So in this case of the Northwest pressure zone, should people that lived there years ago have paid for the increased pressure work? They didn't benefit from it, but the people that live there now and into the future will be paying that bond. They're benefiting directly from that project. So that's kind of another philosophy to consider when you go into bonding projects like this.
Gotcha. I didn't be for my class on philosophy 101.
Municipal Management 101. Yeah, there you go. Good point.
I'm ready to go now. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions on the water utility fund? Okay, the next portion is the sewer utility fund, and under tab E, it begins on page 81. And the detailed sewer budgets are under tab X. Of course, the sewer utility fund includes the operation, obviously, depreciation and capital improvements. And within the operation, we have some administration cost, wastewater treatment plant operation and maintenance, the collection system operation and maintenance, some funding for accounts and collections, and then the transfers. The initiatives for FY26 include continued analysis of the copper compliance. If you'll recall, we entered into a copper translator study about a year ago. The DNR has changed personnel, and their new personnel are different than their old ones, and we're renegotiating the copper translator study right now. So it looks like it'll be more data collection to fulfill their desires for that copper translator study.
Good deal.
We are kicking that can down the road as far as it'll go.
Any chance of changing the parameters?
Yes, there is some, from the information we have so far, it does look optimistic that the parameters may change to a favorable parameter in copper.
Move the decimal point for us. You know what I mean?
Instead of point
Well, we talked about, when we went to Washington DC 2 years, we talked about that.
Yep.
0.000003.
Yeah, and it looks like we've had, 2 studies. We're in the third, the translator study, and it does look promising that they may, those limits may move enough.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you don't want to get into copper removal from wastewater. Nutrient reduction is the other, and of course, that one we're actually coming up on in about a year on the compliance schedule. But what has been done, we believe that the reason the plant's not meeting that nutrient reduction limit is because of lack of air to the vertical loop reactors. And of course, we let the contract, we took bids for the air piping for the vertical loop reactors, and they were too high. So They were rejected, and we had placed that, of course, into the digester project, and that project was let. So we expect that that air piping will be replaced within that project, and that will provide the air necessary to reduce the nutrients in that treatment system to an acceptable level. At least that's the projection. You also are facing chlorides, selenium, and thallium. And selenium and thallium, we have been testing now for over a year, and we have not gotten close to the limits in our wastewater. So we would expect that those constituents will be removed from the permit. That's the expectation. Chloride is a different story. The city exceeds chloride levels that are set by the EPA. And there just isn't any way to take chloride out of water, out of wastewater. The only way to solve it is to not let it get in. And pretty much, we have gone through the system trying to find a smoking gun that is contributing chloride to the wastewater system, and there isn't any. Their chloride is coming from all over the system, and it's primarily coming from home softeners, water softeners. So it's getting into the wastewater from that direction. So the solution to that is less home softeners. That's a huge decision to make, that you get to make.
You're talking about less, you're saying less home softeners, but the city was talking about putting in our own softener, so what's the difference?
Different process. You don't get chloride exchange, ion exchange in a central process. So you don't put chlorides in the water. So home softeners are chloride ion exchange softeners.
How would
So-
you enforce that, like
From
no
salt.
softeners? I mean, that's like
Difficult.
unenforceable.
Well, you have water softener police is what you have, pretty much. That's what it takes to, if you have to comply with
Tom, nice job.
a chloride level,
Over my pay grade, sorry.
if you have to comply with the chloride level, that's what you have to do. We're trying everything short of that, because we know that that's not a popular issue. Absolutely not. But if the EPA and the DNR continue down this path, that's pretty much what you're looking at.
Tom's a face and Brad's the muscle body on this endeavor.
How long have you been testing for this chloride? Just a year, is it, did I catch that right or not?
No, we have tested historically as required. When this came up, we started more testing. I mean,
So, a lot of people, I'm gonna ask you, Kyle, since you're the newest property that I know of, is there a water softener in your new building?
Yeah, and I've got
And
probably,
is it a timer, I mean, is it one that's set so that it just
I've
does
got-
it when needed?
I've got two of them, and they regenerate every 6,000 gallons of water.
Okay, so that's a way of,
But
it's modernized and that would generate less chloride than my old one that's sitting there.
but we
that's
talk
30
like
years old.
copper pipes, like the amount of copper pipes I have back there is through the roof, and they're 2-inch copper pipes.
And I know the first two places you guys just stopped by to enforce.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, if you're using a newer one like that, like as people get new one, I'm kinda curious if you noticed it go down a few years ago, because more people are using that than they used to.
no.
No difference.
No notice, no. Some of them regenerate, well, the on-demand ones are the newer ones.
Right.
It's,
Kinda
it's,
like what he's talking
yeah,
about.
it's on use. And some of them are worse than the timer ones. Because some of us, our timers are set long enough that we run out of soft water once in a while. And the on-demand ones don't. They never run out. They keep that level up. That there just isn't any way in technology yet to reduce the chloride ions in a home softener. Now, maybe it'll come, and hopefully it does, but I don't know what it would be.
The only ingredient you're adding is salt.
Chloride, sodium chloride, and that's
Is there
chloride.
possibly a different
Chloride.
additive of salt that could be used?
Well, there are home softeners that don't use salt. They use other products, but they're terribly expensive.
Okay.
And they're just not
They
common.
still might have the chloride in it, just not the sodium.
Just not the chloride. They have a different ion exchange. Yeah.
How much it costs for the city to put in like a
Glad you asked.
You already had the answer, that's.
You're waiting for me to ask. I can tell you looking
You know,
at me.
you're mad
like-
about a truck, why didn't you hear this number?
Yeah. I didn't bring the information with me, but I've gone through it more than once. And it's cheaper to soften at that plant than it is to soften at every home in the city. My personal bill would go down if the city built a softening plant and I paid my share of it rather than my softener and the salt I put in it.
That's a fancy way of what's the number?
I can probably bring the number, but haven't looked at it for a long time.
Very political answer.
It's costly.
It's a little pitch right there.
That's just the way it is. I mean, I looked at it on a typical user. And for a typical user, it's cheaper to central soften than it is to soften at home.
That doesn't count the money that you have to buy a new water softener when yours breaks down.
Well, it's that, I factored that in as far as, sinking fund for a replacement of the softener. So that's just what it is. We tried it in 95, same information. It was cheaper then to build it down there on Grant Road than it was to do it in every house. And it was not selected by the council at the time. So,
You just throwing them under the bus. those bastards.
no, they made a
You gotta
decision.
remember, you had 2 softener system companies in town?
Yeah.
At that time? We have 1 at least.
Yeah.
Do we still have 2?
Yep.
That lobbied against it because, they make money putting softener systems in people's houses and selling softener salt, so.
Mm-hmm. And there would still be some sales, not like there are now. We've got over 95% home softeners in town. And there would still be some sales because in central softening, I'll step back. In home softening, when your softener recharges, the hardness of your water goes down to about 0. And then, of course, as time progresses and you use water, it increases in hardness. And then it recharges back down to 0. And a lot of people like that 0 soft water. It feels real silky, it's working if you can feel that when you shower. Now, central softening, you set a limit to the level of hardness. And a typical limit is about 100 parts per million. And right now, our water is about 400. So we would lower it to 100. That's acceptable to most people, but not everyone. So even in cities that have central softening, there are softening companies that operate and install and sell softeners. Not as many as we have in Carroll, but there are some. So,
Any city nearby have one, do you know of?
oh, there's a lot of them. Jefferson has a zeolite softener. And then, of course, Ames does. And there are a lot of small towns. And actually, a lot of more small towns are being federally funded for water treatment. And they're going more and more to reverse osmosis. And in reverse osmosis, you take out all the hardness in the water. It's very expensive, but a lot of these small towns have gone recently with federal funding to those RO systems. We probably wouldn't,
Jefferson just did, didn't they?
They have a zeolite system, not an RO.
We probably wouldn't get federal funding?
Probably not. Those are CBDG grants and that kind of thing that, you know, we don't qualify for any of that stuff. Our household incomes are just too high. So,
Good story. We digress.
yeah. Anyway, I think I was on the sewer utility, sanitary sewer utility. As far as the revenue's concerned, the last rate increase was in 23. We don't project another increase right now, at least for the next 5 years. The funding, Digester and VLR, obviously, is the current largest project that we've got going. We're anticipating a need to borrow just over 1.6 million for that. And the way we're proposing that it be structured, for the last 22 years, we've had a bond payment or a debt service payment from the sewer utility fund of about around $750,000. Okay, this fiscal year, 25, will be the last payment on that bond. So that was from when we upgraded the plant in 2025, in 2005. So that's being paid off. So the fund has approximately an additional $750,000 in it that won't be paid for the bond. We're proposing two things for that. One is to use about $250,000 of that for the bond payment for this digester and VLR project. Don't change the rates, don't change anything. Use $250,000 for that bond payment. The other is to use about $500,000 a year and begin sewer rehabilitation throughout the system. Your sanitary sewer system has some age on it. Some of it's over 100 years old. And what I guess the bottom line is, our wastewater treatment plant treats an average day flow of about 1.2 million gallons. The plant is designed for a wet weather flow of 6.1 million gallons. The instantaneous peak wet weather flow from the collection system is in excess of 15 million gallons a day. Now, that comes from infiltration into the sanitary sewer of groundwater. And that infiltration is primarily through deteriorated joints in the system. So we're proposing going in to rehab on an annual basis about 5,000 feet of sanitary sewer and the manholes to eliminate that infiltration into the sewer.
Randy, with that, so if you're spending $500,000 a year, you're ripping up the street to do that.
No. What we're proposing for the majority of the fix is a lining. So you enter a manhole with a liner, send the liner through to the next manhole, cure it out, and it seals it up. There may be some locations where you have to do point excavation, collapsed sewers, whatever it may be. We're not really aware of any badly collapsed sewers at this time, and we video inspect all the sewers on about a 4-year rotation. So there may be a little bit, but not much.
So in the 60s, they used this Orangeburg piping that you see a lot of failures with now. Is that the same thing the city would have used for like the main?
No.
Or is that okay?
No, the Orangeburg was a service line,
Okay.
and you're right, it did not last an extremely long life in our climate. The city sewers are clay. Everything historically was clay. We changed to plastic within our generation, I guess. But mostly clay, 8-foot lengths and then a joint on each end of it. And those joints have been improved over the years, but the early ones really deteriorated. So that's where most of the infiltration is.
So when you put a liner on, we're not doing anything with the joints at that point, just the lining pipe itself.
On the inside of the pipe.
It's a pretty cool
Yep.
process to watch.
What is the
Oh, yeah.
lifespan of this line?
Well, I've read 100 years. It's a resin plastic that's pliable. You put it in and then you heat cure it and it becomes another plastic pipe inside the sewer. Pretty much what it
Goes
is.
in like a big rubber liner on the inside, they push it through and it pops out the other end
Yeah.
and they do their thing with the heat. It's pretty cool. Can that work on 12th Street? Can we just run through? Not too soon?
We had proposed that for Southdale or Southgate Road. Because we did not include replacement of the sanitary in that project. We had inspected the sanitary and decided it wasn't in bad enough shape to replace. 12th Street is probably in bad enough shape to replace.
And this thing won't work because it's in too bad a shape?
That appears to be the case on 12th Street. We're still reviewing it, but it's been totally inspected, everything. Even the service lines have been videoed, and we're looking at every service line in it. And Orangeburg is some of it.
I really can't believe you forgot Orangeburg, the Adams Street project. For all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Orangeburg is still used in some places. In our climate, the problem with Orangeburg was it can't stand up to groundwater. It deteriorates from the outside. And in dry climates, where they only have to bury sewers like in Arkansas, a foot deep, because they never get frost, and it's in rock, Orangeburg still works. They can use it. It's not the material of preference, but there's still some sold there. So, yeah.
Please pass them over bedtime.
I told, this is interesting.
Hopefully your wife, when you get home, feels as much excitement as you do.
It's in his glory.
He is. I was mentioning to Randy, or to Laverne, I said, when we start talking about a project, I haven't found one where Randy hasn't thought about all of the options and thought them all the way through. So
Plethora.
over the last 2 years, I'm rather impressed with how Randy prepares his projects.
You.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but.
Oh, no, I can proceed. We have 6 people within the expenditure in the sewer utility fund, 6 full-time equivalents, 6.1. That's 4 municipal, or plant operators, excuse me, and a superintendent, and then some salaries for us here in City Hall. We distribute our salaries among the 4 funds because we work in all 4 of them. The capital requests that we're making, sludge lagoon cleaning, of course, that's an annual request. We clean the lagoon twice a year. A new mower that fits on the tractor that we have at the wastewater treatment plant. The current mower developed a hole in the casing or in the frame, so it's kind of about time to replace it. And then the replacement of the SCADA system in the wastewater also. And it's also supervisory control and data acquisition system.
I'm gonna ask, why is it $50,000 more on the wastewater than it is on the?
The wastewater one is a little bit more complicated because we've got multiple locations at the plant site. We control every individual building at the plant site to the office. So the office is a control center. Every building on the site is controlled, plus the lift stations that are out in the system.
Can you get like a package deal?
That's what we're going after.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
that's
sounds crazy.
actually, that's why we put the 2 together, the water and wastewater. We plan on preparing a contract to bid that as one, and then the advantage is cost, hopefully. The other advantage is both systems are the same. So you get a guy trained on operating one, maintaining one, he can do the other.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Then in capital improvements, of course, the big project this year is the digester and VLR. And that, of course, is let, it will be under construction. It has a July 26th completion date on it. So we'll be moving forward with that. The other projects, capital projects, we do put some money in there for copper and nutrient reductions and compliance. Hopefully, we don't have to spend it. Hopefully, effluent limits are high enough. We do not have to do that. But we're preparing for it, or proposing to prepare for it. And then sanitary sewer rehabilitation, that's the design work for that sanitary rehab project to get that ready for letting the following fiscal year. Okay, are there any questions on the sanitary sewer budget? If not, the next is the stormwater utility fund, and that begins in tab E on page 84. And the detailed portion of that's under tab Y. It includes the stormwater utility and the capital improvements. The utility is where we collect the revenue. Currently, the fees generate about $260,000 a year. That fund was initiated in 2004, so it's been about 20 years that fund has been being used. Those fees have been being collected. We've funded a couple of storm sewer projects from it. Of course, we planned on funding a lot of storm sewer on that Southgate Road project, but now that's not reflected. That expenditure is not reflected in this budget, so it ends up at with a nice fund balance of about $2.1 million. Otherwise, the expenditures are pretty minimal from that fund. I think that the only expenditures for sales tax on those collected funds. The other, for the current fiscal year, is the balance of the design work that we'll be paying for that Southgate Road project, and it'll be on the shelf. So it's also proposed in your capital improvement budget for 27, I believe. So you'll make a decision on that before then, whether to move forward with it or whether to kick it down the road. That's about it. The capital improvements, of course, that's just funding in and funding out. Ends up with a small balance, $140,000.
That's a $5 million project, right?
Yes,
Is there anything in here that's putting money away so that eventually we can?
there isn't anything. That's about a $4 million project. And no, there isn't anything in here that would put money away for that.
I guess the question
What's happened is,
there a way that we can budget money away so that way it takes the sting off?
what happens in that project, though, is the funding that's now targeted for it from the Storm Sewer Utility Fund approximately pays for all of the storm sewer in that project. We've got a little bit of water change, relocation and stuff. That's being funded by a contribution from the Water Utility Fund. We've got a little bit of sewer relocation in it. That's being funded by the Sewer Utility Fund. The balance is street work, street replacement. So you fund it from
Road use
general
tax.
fund.
Road use tax.
Well, actually from debt service, because we would work it into our debt service plan to pay for that. Keep that under the $1.40 debt service levy and pay for it through that, because again, if you start putting money away, and this is what I was alluding to in my intro memo, we're using local option sales tax dollars to help cover annual capital expenditures. I got it right this time, didn't I?
Reoccurring.
Whatever. Anyway, to pay for expenses in our normal everyday general budget per se. So we're not gonna, I mean, without any true economic development growth, hence this is why I work hard on economic development. Because without any growth to the general fund or to the CGFL, we're gonna struggle in the future to be able to make ends meet. And so to try and put money away to do things when, if you can still use that debt service levy to take care of it within that $1.40 level, we need to be very careful with that to do that, because we need to make sure we have money to operate along with continuing with our infrastructure. That's what I got. Are you finished?
I am, unless there are any questions.
Are you sure? Okay.
Do you want me
The
to
only
go?
other thing we had were a number of tabs that we could talk, I think Laura and I agree, we'll put those off until Wednesday. And if it would take a long time on Wednesday night, then we could put them off until next week, Monday too. So,
Would we wanna maybe start with these again, and if it goes long, we can slip that in?
yeah, that's what our plan is, to go police,
Correct.
library, parks and rec, and then if we got time, we'll do the tabs.
Okay.
Okay?
Perfect.
I think we did that last year. We finished it up after a council meeting.
We may have.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, typically after that, once we go through these 2 nights, a lot of the last few years, that after the council meeting, it's kind of like, okay, any last thoughts, suggestions for changes, last summary, and hopefully that we can get through pretty much the whole proposals, presentations from all the departments prior to that meeting.
All right, Tom, you beat me, I was gonna ask you again.
Motion and a second.
Vic?
You did you second?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Jason.
Yes.
Jason.
Jason, JJ.